Hello, I'm Aisha Sobey. I'm a researcher at the Leverhulme Centre for the Future of Intelligence, and I will present my paper Conceptualising Fatness in HCI, a call for fat liberation. This research stems from my desire as a fat person to live what Butler describes as a livable life, and I'll use the term fat as a neutral descriptor in solidarity with fat activists who are reclaiming the term. So, to start, we know that digital systems have been shown to reflect and perpetuate societal biases. These biases find their way into the very fabric of our online experiences and reinforce discrimination against marginalised communities. In response, design justice, which centres these marginalised communities and aims to infuse equity into the design of systems, is popularly employed within HCI studies and is situated as best practice in many regards. However, the standard design justice toolkit tends to focus on legally protected characteristics and does not therefore address anti-fat bias. Despite minimal legal protection, anti-fat bias is deeply ingrained in society, especially in the West, and has been evidenced across healthcare, legal systems, and employment, to name a few. It's the only form of bias that is increasing, and in the 2018 Harvard implicit bias test, they found that 80% of people hold anti-fat bias, with misconceptions of fat people as inherently lazy, gluttonous, not hardworking, not intelligent, and unhealthy, which can have serious consequences for fat people trying to live their lives. Moreover, the roots of anti-fat bias can be traced back to the colonial project, serving white fragility and superiority over marginalised groups. As such, anti-fat bias is intersectional and commonly co-occurs with protected characteristics, but forms a way to discriminate against these groups in the open. In response, fat activism and liberation movements emerging from queer feminist circles since the 1960s advocate for the emancipation of fat individuals from oppressive norms. These movements prioritise community-centred solutions and reject the commercial interests in bodies like the diet industry. They challenge the medicalisation of bodies, especially around the reductive measure of the BMI and language such as overweight and obesity, which categorise people as needing to be fixed. Mallow made the case to bring fatness to feminist disability studies, which would allow more in-depth account of illness and health. And I argue that the fat perspective in HCI would allow new critiques of behaviour change technologies for health to be levied, and more diverse people to be served by such technologies. I just want to address health as a question here. Health and weight have been conflated, but we don't know the exact link between the two, beyond co-occurrence. We do know that health is more complicated than one measure. We know that billions of pounds are made on the idealisation of thinness in the diet and wellness industries. We know individual weight loss attempts are actually a predictor of weight gain, and no country, despite decades of policies aimed at controlling the obesity epidemic, has lowered its average weight. So at both the individual and population levels, weight is not really controllable. We also know that weight stigma in healthcare is rife, and it does cause harm, including death. And finally, we also know, drawing on CRIP advocacy against healthism, that even if weight were a key indicator of health, health status should not be a qualifying factor for kind and respectful treatment. As such, there is a keen need to develop ways to design digital systems to support the diversity of needs and desires of fat people, and support ongoing efforts for emancipation. But what does it mean to be fat in the digital world? I identify 4 key locations for digital anti-fat bias to express itself, which reflect the non-digital places where anti-fat bias has been located and challenged by fat study scholars. Firstly, digitised formal healthcare, and secondly, informal digital healthcare, such as self-tracking apps and the quantified self. Thirdly, social media, as these online spaces have become platforms for fat activism, fostering community and resistance against stigma, while at the same time they expose fat individuals to abuse and shame. Finally, generative AI, due to the reproduction of biases in the datasets and the importance of LLMs and generative art for self-representation and expression. With an idea of where digital anti-fat bias could be encountered, I undertook a narrative literature review to bring together different research fields and any work on anti-fat bias in digital systems. However, this review found only a very small number of papers, none of which gave an overview of HCI or design. So I wanted to know how HCI as a field conceptualizes fatness writ large. And to do that, I undertook an in-depth scoping review based on Prisma reporting principles. I searched for the term body weight in the ACM digital library. The ACM library was chosen as it was understood to represent the current broad trends in research, represent the largest body of computing scholars, and has key conferences on ethics and justice in the HCI community, such as this one, to give a good cross-section of digital design research. The term body weight was chosen as it was considered a neutral descriptor that would be used in conjunction with stigmatizing, neutral, and liberational approaches to a person's weight, and would be encountered in the definition of terms of papers, and would allow all types of research focused on weight to be captured. Between the 1st and 31st of July 2023, 897 papers were returned that contained the term body weight. In total, 734 of these were excluded. There were 3 duplicate records and 731 records that, from their title, abstract, and use of the term body weight, did not offer any conceptualization of weight. For example, subcategories in the excluded records included animal studies, body motion capture, healthcare that considered body weight for drug administration or in relation to the size of an organ, technology to support disabilities, chronic illnesses and rehabilitation, and elder care. 163 records were included as they offered a conceptualization of human body weight that was central to the topic and/or aim of the paper. Of the 163 included papers, key 3 themes emerged and are shown in this slide. The largest theme were weight control and monitoring for health, with 109 papers including this, and behaviour change with 106 papers addressing this topic. 42 papers overlapped with both of these themes and studied behaviour change for weight loss explicitly. Subcategories within these fields were exercise gaming, discussing weight loss, eating disorder research, and step count monitoring. All of these I classed as stigmatizing due to their reliance on the measure of the BMI and related categories of under, over, and obese weights, which inherently stigmatize people in classing them as people that need bodies that need to be solved. The papers did not question the racialized origins of the BMI and made assumptions about the categories. For example, that people with eating disorders would be underweight. 6 papers did challenge body normativity in digital design, and 2 of these used queer theory to highlight gendered assumptions about weight that had been built into design. Consequently, HCI as a field can be understood to conceptualize weight as something to be solved for through digital design, instead of a factor which can actively discriminate against people. As such, I argue that there is a pressing need to reevaluate how weight and fatness are understood in relation to design. With this pressing need, I will now highlight areas where important interventions could occur by considering Shelby et al.'s 2023 classification of harms against the 4 key locations of anti-fat bias. Across generative AI, formal and informal healthcare and social media, there's a notable gap in understanding the interaction between anti-fat bias, harms, and digital design. There is a limited research into social media and all types of harm, which primarily stems from healthcare researchers and obesity researchers aiming to evidence weight stigma in social media. This research tends to overlook lived experiences, focusing instead on content analysis of online interactions through social media posts. This leaves research into digital anti-fat bias and the complexities of data, representation, and digital design limited. Additionally, interpersonal harms are considered in informal healthcare in relation to eating disorders. Yet, this leaves representational harms, allocative harms, quality of service harms, and social system harms of anti-fat bias in informal healthcare systems understudied, in addition to all of these areas and interpersonal harms missing for formalized digital healthcare and generative AI, both images and LLMs. While this gap in understanding is stark, it also presents an opportunity for a transdisciplinary approach to advance fat liberation within human-computer interaction. The gap presented highlights the scope for intervention that and I offer 3 broad mechanisms for designers to consider. Firstly, incorporate fat voices into the design process. Design Justice already champions participatory research. From within the disability justice sphere, a common moniker is nothing about us without us. And this, I argue, applies to fatness too, and will be crucial to ensure an ethical process. Secondly, disentangle health and fatness when designing for health, whether formalised or informal. As the meta-review showed, a dominant strand of HCI research looked at designing for health, and it is therefore a key area for intervention. At a minimum, this could mean removing the use of weight as a proxy for health in many self-tracking techniques, and in questioning the use of the BMI as a measure. More substantially, the paradigm of goal-orientated self-tracking within HCI could be questioned for the propensity of trackable goals to reproduce power structures and idealized bodies. Thirdly and finally, I would argue for promoting expansive design. And I use the term expansive design to highlight design practices that could allow and promote diversity in the user base and offer the ability to personalize, give feedback, and request changes to interfaces, representation, and technological design. This suggestion is linked to the variety of desires of fat people. Reflecting the strong social mandate to lose weight, some fat people may wish to try to do so. And conversely, there will be people, whether fat or not, who, for various reasons, do not want to or need to engage with weight loss, calorie counting, or body normative messaging. So designers will need to think carefully about how to set defaults to support equality for users with different contradictory desires and also allow contradiction over a single user path. Ultimately, anti-fat bias is a social problem that cannot be simply designed out of existence, but combating anti-fat bias in digital spaces is an important research agenda for just design. It will require a concerted effort from researchers, designers, and activists alike. Yet there are practical ways of designing that do not assume the status quo is correct. This paper has given a non-exhaustive taxonomy of possible harms that intersect and are supported by digital systems against and reproducing anti-fat bias. In doing so, it's presented a first stage of work to identify the research gaps and argue for the transdisciplinary collaboration between fat studies scholars, health scholars, and those who work in HCI to begin to produce a more radically accepting digital world. Thanks. And these are my references in the next 2 pages.